Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, back with another episode of Talking About Games. This is a late night episode. So, thanks a lot for anybody who happens to come through the chat and anybody who happens to view this the archive version of this video at a later time in the VOD, as the kids like to say. We're going to put a little background music on just to keep things from being silent when I have to step away and grab some coffee, which I will have to do. For those who are unfamiliar with the show's format, this is my solo cast, so I do a little weekly video podcast called The Enough to Keep Going weekly video game show, and then also frequently show up on the Basement Radio Arcade podcast, as well as the Damage Per Second podcast. I'll actually be on this Thursday night is the plan and the intention, unless things go sideways. So but all of those shows, I don't have control over those agendas. I'm a participant, I'm a panel member. Even as much as I get input into the way E2KG goes down, it's still a collaborative process amongst the three co-hosts. But this is my own little corner where I'm able to talk about the stuff that is a primary interest to me and cover down on some of the things that are going on in the video gaming industry. So without much further ado, let's get to it. Anticipate that there will be mistakes. This is not as heavily scripted a show as some of the other ones. So without much further ado, let's get to it. The first news story that I want to go over is S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 Heart of Chernobyl receives 2 patches focused on bug fixes, optimizations, and much more. Bring the story up on screen here. Okay, this news story over on WCC F-Tech by Muhammad Zuhair. S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 Heart of Chernobyl has seen the addition of 2 major patches, bringing in over 650 fixes. WCC F-Tech has a ton of videos and ads on their site. GSC Game World has apparently acknowledged the widespread bugs that have ruined the experience for many players. The developers are looking quite active in pushing out effective patches that include a large set of fixes. Patch 1.01 and patch 1.02 were released in quick succession by GSC Game World, with the first one mainly dealing with improving the A-Life system, along with several optimizations, while the latter one targeted bug fixes for 6 different missions. Now, the list of bugs on here is very long and sundry. I have been playing this game. I picked it up. I actually purchased it through Xbox, through the Microsoft Store. I mean, I use the Game Pass app, although I'm not a Game Pass subscriber. That's still the launcher that I use for games published by Xbox on PC. There's a ton of releases, as the article mentioned. There were 650. I know some people I've seen have been afflicted by some of the gamepad bugs and the dead zones. The one that in particular has bit me was kind of the goofy knife physics, where when you click to attack with the knife doesn't actuate unless there's actually a target within range of the knife that can be struck by the knife. So in a major fight, which was kind of one of my, I wouldn't say turn-offs, but just put the game in a certain corner for me. I was attempting, there's a mission after you reach, I think the first main town's name is Zasaya. You reach that town, and then you go and you are trying to turn on a radar tower after that for to track, I think, the PDA of a target that you're going after, and there's a pack of wild dogs around that SATCOM site, and I was trying to attack them with a knife because I didn't have a lot of ammo at the time, and the result of that, because of the way it was working, at least before this patch, I hope, was that the knife wouldn't actuate because the dog wasn't in range. And so by the time the dog is in range, you're late, right, attacking with the knife, because I'm trying to attack them with the knife, I'm trying to anticipate them being at the attack point. And so that would wind up resulting in, you taking, 2 bites of damage or whatever. When the pack of dogs is like 8, somewhere between 8 and 12, then that obviously causes a problem. So there's a lot of things in this fixed list that Game Center. that in particular, during the time that I was playing the game, there were other graphical artifacting that I would see, like if there were bullet holes or scars or damage on a character's face, and the character was talking, then sometimes those things would kind of remain like fixed. They wouldn't like move with the muscles on the face. So it was creating a little bit of an uncanny valley. Added missing footage to TV displays in the final cutscene, unreadable text, physics issues with destructible and movable objects. One of the ones that I also saw, which I think is a bug, although I'm not actually certain if I don't know if the game was actually supposed to work like this or was a bug, but where I had taken down some human NPCs, but then there was like a whirlwind or something, and I couldn't tell if it was like an anomaly or a ghost or whatever, because there are like non-corporal, like ghost-like beings or something that are enemies. I encountered one of them in a little shack like shortly after this, where I had taken down these human NPCs and then run, like I said, to this outpost or whatever, and one of these beings was in there, and when you shot it, it congeals kind of into like a pile of rocks, like floating in the air. I couldn't tell if it was one of those beings or something else, but like whenever I would get close to the body, because I was wanting to loot it, this whirlwind would come through and pick the body up, and the body would hit me and I would take damage. So I think that has been fixed. I'm not absolutely certain, and that's kind of a big, not problem with the game, but just a thing where sometimes you encounter these things and you're not absolutely certain whether they're bugs or not. So it's tough for me to tell if the things that have been fixed are things that I've actually encountered in the game. Like I said, I've been playing the game. I'm a PC only gamer. The game sits at an 83% right now in community reviews on Steam. Again, I didn't buy it from Steam, but I always look at Steam reviews before I buy something from whatever storefront. So I've had fun with the game. Like I said, there's been there's been glitches or wonkiness or things that I've encountered. Some of those have not necessarily been showstoppers for me. What has been, again, I don't want to call it a showstopper, but has just put this game in a certain corner where I only want to play it for about an hour at a time, is the technical performance issues that I've run into. And these are points where you're entering a cutscene, or maybe I've seen this when I've gone to interact with a trader, right? Because I want to, upgrade a weapon or buy ammo or whatever. And the game just slows to a crawl, becomes a slideshow. In the case of the cutscene, I was able to back out and reload, and then things, worked fine. In the case of, when I got in vicinity of the trader because I wanted to interact with them, it did not. That didn't correct the problem. So that, in combination with some of the other stuff, which I actually think is a little more minor than those critical performance issues. And again, I'm not talking about performance issues where there's like a frame rate drop. My range that I have been seeing in the game, and the box I have that game loaded on is a Ryzen 9 5950X, 32 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM, and an NVIDIA RTX 4070 Super. I'm seeing a frame rate range between 60 and about 105 frames per second. That's a wide degree of variance, and I would prefer it to be tighter. But it's not a showstopper. But those points where I'm hitting in the game where it's just slowing down to a crawl are problematic, because it causes me problems like getting past that point in the game. It causes me worry and concern and anxiety to a certain extent that the game is going to crash and pull my system down with it. So like I said, I've been playing it, but I've been keeping my play sessions pretty short. And like I said, I have hit some of those bugs. The 83% rating that the game has on Steam, I think is a good thing for GSC Game World and for the S.T.A.L.K.E.R franchise in general. It's one that I have played for a long time. I haven't played it, I haven't gone back and revisited it tons of times, but I have, gone and played a handful of those games over the years. This game showing up as a as a unit in Game Pass. I don't know that necessarily does a ton of good for the Game Pass strategy for that overall effort. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. This game was never a system seller. It was never a thing that was going to draw large numbers of Game Pass subscribers. I don't know that there's a ton of great conversation to be had about that. I'm sure that conversation is going on out there. But at the end of the day, it's a game that services a particular niche. It definitely leans very heavily into the survival aspect of the shooter, more so than I think the shooter mechanics, which is probably yet another reason why it kind of sits in a certain corner with me, because I am not a survival game fan. But for people who are looking for something that's a little slower, a little more deliberate, not like a hopped up on steroids Call of Duty kind of shooter, this should be something that is very serviceable. I think this game leans very much in the direction of kind of the Metro series, which makes sense if you go back to the history. I've talked about that ad nauseum in previous episodes of Tag, so I'm not going to cover it here. But if you go back to when this team, to the original GSC game world, and all that history about how that original company was shut down and people were let go, there was kind of this 3-vector exodus away from that studio, and one of the vectors, which with where the people wound up, was at 4A Studios, who does the Metro game. So it makes sense that there's some DNA that you would see some commonality between those two franchises. That all being said, despite the fact that there are some rough edges around this game and that it lacks some polish and it definitely needs some more time to cook in the oven, this team has been through a lot. They were originally out of Ukraine. I believe they're seated now in the Czech Republic, primarily. But they've gone through the Russian war in that area. They have members who have served and are continuing to serve. They have had loss of life on the team. There's a documentary out about that experience for the team, and about a little bit about the production of the game. I think it's more about their experience and the struggles that they've been through, in my opinion. But nothing can be taken away from this team despite those things. I'm gonna be quite honest, there are other teams who put out games who have just as rough edges around them, and they're not in the middle of a war zone. So the fact that this game got published at all, the team deserves kudos for that, in my opinion. So let's go on and go to the next news story, and I'm gonna take a break and grab something to drink really quick. So just give me 1 second. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the next story. Yet another game that is very much in my interest. And I should bring that up on the screen as well. This news story, the Delta Force Season Pass lets you choose which parts you want to pay for. This news story over on PC Games N by Will Nelson. Team Jade has outlined what the Delta Force Season Pass will look like, as the free-to-play first-person shooter gives you multiple choices and tiers. Just like many other free-to-play games, Delta Force will have a Season Pass. The upcoming tactical FPS is doing things a little differently than most, however. It's giving you a couple of cheaper options, depending on whether you want to play the Battlefield or Escape from Tarkov-like game modes. And so this game has it has 3 game modes that I know of, that I think I understand. So there's a 32v32 PvP mode. There is an Escape from Tarkov like extraction shooter mode, which I think is PvPvE. And then there is the Black Hawk Down mission, which is actually a resurrected mission from the original Delta Force games by Nova Logic. And we'll come back to that a little bit more later. So if you find yourself gravitating towards large-scale battles or tense extraction loops, you can easily pick and choose which you want to get the extra awards from. So I want to get down to a little bit of the meat of the Battle Pass. Delta Force release date for the multiple choices with the multiplayer game Season Pass. If you don't want to spend anything, then there's the free tier, which is something that you typically see. in most free-to-play games. And they say it'll have valuable rewards. I mean, there's every developer, right, is going to say that. Then if you want to buy the Delta Force Season Pass, though, you'll have 3 options. You can either pay for Season Pass tracks for just operations, or warfare, so you don't have to buy the whole battle pass. You can buy a battle pass for a mode, whichever one you think you're going to play the majority of. Instead of buying both separately, you can also spend some cash on the deluxe version of the season pass. This bundled edition comes with everything from both the warfare and operations purchases, alongside access to operator trucks, cheaper than the other 2 combined, as you'll pay $9.60. So basically what you have is your 3 different ways to buy the battle pass. You can either buy the battle pass for a given track, or you can buy the combo pass, the deluxe pass, and you get a bit of a discount, rather than paying the sum price of what each of those individual passes would cost. You get it at a discounted price of $10. You can think of that as a discounted price, or you can think of it more as they mark the price up if you don't buy both, which would tend to be the way that I would think about it. Now, why do I care about Delta Force? Again, older gamer, been around for a while. Delta Force has a not like super fun place in my heart as far as that individual franchise, but just in terms of the place that it occupies, kind of in my nostalgia and memory of like the periods, phases, ages, evolution that the gaming industry has gone through, that PC gaming has gone through. And so I remember all those games, and kind of, again, that the time in the design arc of video games, of when they existed. I actually have all those games now on Steam. Steam brought them back, and they went on sale a while ago. So I've got them. So looking forward to this. I think the other thing for me is, I'm kind of looking for something that is different than Call of Duty. I think one of my biggest markers for this year is kind of how disappointing X-Defiant was, and how I had hoped that it was going to kind of occupy some of that space, so that I wasn't playing Call of Duty all the time. I've since kind of fallen off of Call of Duty, so I haven't bought Black Ops 6. Talking to Brap, he has finished the single-player campaign. I'm not a Game Pass subscriber. I'm pretty sure he accessed it via Game Pass. I'm not a Game Pass subscriber, so it wasn't something that I was going to pay $70 for to play the single-player campaign. Typically, when I was out of the Call of Duty world, what I would do is I would loop back and buy those things, like when they were heavily discounted, like when they showed up, when the older games were on Steam. The older games were on Steam, so not during the time that they, went away from Steam, but the older games were there, Call of Duty Ghosts or whatever it was, and things like that. And I would buy them at steep discount and then play them, but I haven't gotten on board Black Ops 6. Not because I think that it's a bad game, just because I just hit a point in my arc and evolution where I was concerned and bothered about how much time I was spending in games as a service. I still love games as a service, and it's still kind of a core part of my rotation. But Call of Duty itself was just consuming a vast amount of time by itself, right? To the point where I couldn't even get around to some of the other live service games that I enjoy playing. So I kind of walked away from that. But in that walking away, and in the app, with the not as great sticking of a landing that there was with X-Defiant, I am kind of looking forward to this franchise that brings back a lot of nostalgia for me, and from what I've seen, looks to be pretty good. Now, I think this thing has had betas and maybe was even available in early access for a while, I think, on Steam. I'm not absolutely certain, but I believe it has done betas. I didn't participate in any of those, but I think that I've seen relatively positive buzz. So I'm also hoping that, given the multiple modes that it covers, I'm also always on the lookout for a shooter that actually elicits more teamwork from people, rather than, just a shooter that's toxic. I mean, I love playing Call of Duty, but like, I'd never turn voice chat on when I'm in those lobbies. It's just an entirely toxic place. There's always the guy who's, got kids screaming in the background, and rap music or Latin music, like just blaring ridiculously overly loud, whose wife is screaming at him or whatever in the background. There's always some variant of that. And then that also is a person that tends to talk crap to every other player in the room. So I just like, yeah, no. I harken back to the days of the Xbox 360 and Xbox Live, and how we had control of lobbies, and it was such a great place, because if somebody wasn't with the vibe of your group, then you would just kick them out of the lobby. Unfortunately, we don't have that now. We're probably never going to get that back, so I don't necessarily want the lobby control back, but just that notion of finding like-minded gamers who are really about camaraderie and about teamwork and having fun. I'm all constantly on the lookout for a first-person shooter in particular that kind of fills that bill, and sometimes you can find a little of that. Sometimes in Halo Infinite, and some of the other games out there, you could definitely, and this is one of the things, you were definitely able to find that a lot in Destiny 2. Even when it was unspoken, we on E2KG often talk a lot about how Destiny 2 had this really crazy dynamic of just being, even when you were silent and you weren't in voice chat, when you were doing a strike with people, you always felt like you were with a fire team, right? You always felt that kind of ethos around the game. And so, looking forward for something like that coming back. I know that might be a lofty ideal to hope for that game to achieve, but hopefully it will. All right, let's go ahead and get ready to move on to the next story. And again, I'm gonna grab a little coffee. All right, so we'll talk a little PC hardware. We'll call it news, although it's probably leaks and rumors. Let's go ahead and bring this one up on screen. Okay, how much will the RTX 5090 cost? This $50,000 server gives clues. The story over on PC World by Michael Kreider. Now, this is not strictly a news story, but I did kind of want to cover it because there's much hubbub and to do in the news cycle, in the rumor mill, in the leak cycle about how much are these cards going to cost. That's one lane, but then there's also a very large discussion around how much power they consume, what's going to be the max wattage, what's going to be the TDP of these cards, what kind of crazy bonga cooling solution is the stock NVIDIA card going to have on it, much less the AIBs that the other vendors put out. So like I said, this story over on PC World, the buzz around the web is that NVIDIA's next-gen graphics card will be coming sometime in early 2025, and I'm going to take a stop and a time out there. There was a leak over the Thanksgiving holiday where there appeared to be ad copy. I think this is one of the Amazon leaks about a card. Actually, no, it was I can't remember what site was doing it, or maybe I think it was a sales site, and they were doing their Black Friday like live stream and stuff. It may have been Newegg. I'm not absolutely certain. And there was a vendor rep on there from one of the board integrators, and I think she mentioned actually it was an Asian website. So this was based on an interpretation and based on somebody who reported hearing this. But she mentioned that this card was going to be available through that site in mid-December. And so it's given rise to this concept and theory that possibly what will happen, particularly in certain territories, is that while NVIDIA and AMD have talked about announcing their next generation of video cards at CES in 2025, there is a possibility, slim possibility, that some SKUs of this card will show up in retail channels in certain regions ahead of the announcement, which is absolutely possible, or that maybe this card is going to go out to reviewers in advance of the announcement, which is another significant possibility. So I'll continue. We don't know how much they'll cost, but a whole hell of a lot seems like a safe bet, and apparently that'll be true even if you're buying them in a massive industrial server, which is the first place where we've seen a price attached. Now, basically, this is some sleuthing by Kreider based on some things that he saw reported on videocards.com. And basically, what he was looking at is the BOM for this server and how much the cost for the GPU would break down to. What he came up with was that there was a price in the server of $6,500 or so per card. Now, that's when you're buying them at bulk. Now, again, this is an industrial variant of the card. I don't think that they'll look anything like that at retail. That's about a server that had RTX 3090 cards in it for a 4-card machine. It came up to $7,000 per card. Now, but what he's doing is he's breaking it down solely based on the cost of the card. Obviously, for an enterprise server, that's not what you're being charged for in its entirety. You're being charged for the processor, and you're being charged especially for storage and memory and things like that. And these enterprise servers typically have some, a significant amount of RAM. Anywhere, including like 128 gigs, 256 gigs of RAM. What he comes down on is, I guess, across looking at multiple servers, he comes down on the lowest, possible price across a range of historical prices when these things are packed in servers of $1,160. Kreider theorizes that these things might be $2,500 or more. I don't personally think that they'll be that. What I'm hoping is for a $1,500 card for the RTX 5090. And then that's my optimal target that I'm hoping for. I think I would not be surprised to see a $2,000 card. And honestly, I think that that's more kind of realistic about where this card is potentially going to land, particularly at launch. So, we're just going to have to kind of see how that goes. The state of the industry is such that, particularly, between, we all kind of went through a wallabanger of, the crypto crisis and the pandemic, and then a mixture of the two that really kind of created this major rift in terms of where the industry landed in comparison to its past history. We saw a vast erosion of the notion of the $500 card. Back in the day on like Maximum PC, when they would do their Dream Machine every year, they would do their Dream Machine, but then they also typically kept a running tab in every issue of like the budget build, the mid-range build, and the high-end build. And the budget build was typically always oriented around a $500 GPU. And for a long time, we've seen it come back, but for a long time, the $500 GPU had kind of been eroded out of the retail channels. The cheapest that we saw really at MSRP was like a $550, was like a $550 card. And as we're approaching the launch of the 5000 series cards, we're starting to see, the 4060 and some other cards that are, kind of settling down, at less than 500. Not necessarily MSRP, but, as the typical retail stocking price when you go out and look. TDP on this card, like I said, is going to be huge. For me, like one of the major takers of confidence was the whole 12 volt high power situation with the 4090s, which was also weird because, and that was simply because of the amount of power that card drew across that connector. That connector didn't seem to be a problem for the 4080 series cards, and it has gone on to become kind of the standard connector even for lower cards. But that problem with the 4090 lingered beyond its launch year, in fact into the second year. And last December, when I made I was coming down on my decision of buying a 4080 or a 4090, I was talking to a good mutual of mine, Ramon Terrell, and I was kind of looking and seeing where prices were settling out, and budget wise I was set to go with a 4090. but that 12-volt high power connector was just continuing to be a problem, even though we were starting to see. And the problem was that there was a modification and update to the spec, but the problem was people were reporting that that units of the SKUs without the update were still in retail channels, and so I was like, I'm just not rolling the dice on that. So, like I said, prices on the 5090 are going to be high. One of the things that I mentioned on Enough to Keep Going, obviously, lots of talks right now about inflation, but what I keep telling people is like inflation is significantly lower than the peak that we saw in kind of the 2021, 2022 timeframe. It has come significantly down from when it was up at 7%, 8%. But I think the problem, and one of the things that doesn't get talked about, and that particularly needs to be acknowledged in the electronic space, is that when prices go high because of inflation, corporations are very reluctant to then lower prices when inflation goes down, because once you have moved the battle line to a certain price point, why would you back off of that when that has become normalized? And so, the PC World guys on the Full Nerd in their most recent episode of their podcast mentioned like this is a horrible year for GPU for Black Friday and Cyber Monday sales, and actually they didn't do. Brad Charkis mentioned that he's been at PC World for I think 12 years, and in 12 years there's only been 2 years when they have not even bothered to do a GPU section for their Black Friday recommendation segment on the site. One of those times was at the height of the pandemic, just because prices have not come back down and there weren't a lot of great deals. So, I mean, where this thing is going to land is probably going to be out of sorts with even the 4000 series, right? As a notion of what is normal. I can't remember exactly what the leaks have been for what memory they're putting on this card and how much there is. I'm pretty certain I think it's a 24 gig VRAM card. So, unfortunately these days with NVIDIA, particularly if you want to get out of the, is 8 gigabytes enough kind of argument, like you really have to go for one of the higher end cards. And so, I'm sure that the 5090 will come with that. As I mentioned, you'll have the 12-volt high power concern, although this time around, hopefully it won't be an issue. In my mind, just again, given the fact that it did happen, I still consider this a fairly bullish move right by NVIDIA if they're going to come out with this card priced at $2,000 and just kind of not acknowledge that they gave consumers a reason to kind of blink their eyes, right, about going after a 4090 last time around because of that connector problem and how slow it was to kind of evolve and come to the surface that there was an issue, and how NVIDIA was gonna deal with it. So it'll be interesting to see if they go at it. But like I said, not like I said, but NVIDIA is on a high right now with all of the push behind AI and having joined the $1 trillion club. So it's probably going to come out that way. But like I said, to do that just kind of ignores what has gone on to date. So let's go on to the next news story. All right, this news story over on video cards. First Ryzen AI 300 gaming handheld now available, costs 91% more than the ROG Ally X. The first AMD Strix Point HX370 gaming handheld is now shipping. Let's see, one X player has just announced that their first gaming handheld equipped with the latest AMD processor is now shipping. This is the first known gaming handheld featuring the Strix Point APU, now available for purchase, but specs aside, one really needs a good reason to pay this much. The One X Fly F1 Pro is the first device shipping with either Ryzen AI 9 365 or Ryzen AI 9 HX370. Both are Strix-Point Zen 5 CPUs that also feature AMD's latest RDNA 3.5 integrated graphics. The architecture upgrade aside, there are also more CPU and GPU cores, which undoubtedly will bring a direct performance boost. I think the thing that is most disconcerting about this thing is so the AI 9 365 32 gigs 1 terabyte is $1,100. Then it goes to, and that's the entry price. Everything else is an uptick from there, landing at $1,700. And so this is the thing that is a bit of a nit with this market segment. Is, you know, the Steam Deck has sold in the single-digit number of millions of units, I believe. The Windows variants of handheld gaming PCs have sold in the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands units at best. You know, maybe the ROG Ally X across the multiple SKUs and the number of times that they've kind of, you know, launched and relaunched and relaunched that device, maybe it's nearing 1 million. But the segment has yet to really take off, in my opinion. And I'm not talking about what the media says. I think what the media is saying about the handheld PC segment is kind of the same bit of gaslighting that we've been getting about 3D TVs and VR. Neither of which, I mean, 3D TVs, you know, that market segment push really kind of just went entirely extinct. VR is obviously stagnating and slowing down. And I think, you know, handhelds, I don't think that they're going to stagnate, but they're definitely, I don't think, going to become the thing that the media is telling us that they're going to be. And one of these problems is the price. Again, I was a reviewer during the height of, I guess, kind of mobile innovation, you know, if you want to call it that. But, you know, this is the same problem that Microsoft had with tablet PCs taking off in the, you know, at the turn of the century. It is definitely the same problem that they experienced when they tried to make UMPCs or ultra mobile PCs go, is they never got the price points down to where the more mainstream consumer would really consider them a viable product. So while this is going on, MSI has also this weekend released its own next round of competing product. It is super impressive and interesting in that it is the implementation of Intel's Lunar Lake chip, which has a significantly low TDP, which should play well in a handheld form factor like this, where power is a concern, but also be able to bring a lot of compute power to the fight as well. And so it's great to see AMD dive into its next phase of its technical approach to this market segment. But to me, what I've been saying, and I've said this on the Basement Radio Arcade podcast and on Enough to Keep Going, what is really going to make this market segment super interesting in 2025 is if we see, again, what we just saw, which is MSI, lean out and pull Lunar Lake into an implementation on this platform. And I'm hoping what that does is that's going to pull Qualcomm into the pool and get them to start deploying Snapdragon X as a handheld gaming PC processor. And I'm hoping that also pulls NVIDIA into the fight with whatever their ARM for Windows solution is going to be, which we're hearing, I'm hoping that we start, if it doesn't full on launch in mid 2025, I'm hoping that it is at least announced and that we start seeing some product before the end of the year. That notion of making the low TDP, small package processor that is optimized for handheld gaming PCs, having three vendors in the mix, three designers in the mix, could make things super interesting in 2025. So hoping that the industry goes that way. Let's go ahead and move on to the next news story. All right, this news story also over on video cards. Max Sun to launch ARC Battlemage ARC B850 iCraft GPU. Intel has a new board partner for the next gen GPU series. Max Sun is set to launch its first Intel graphics card. The company known for its strong lineup of GeForce RTX cards has been a major NVIDIA board partner in China for years. While Max Sun also released numerous Radeon GPUs in the past, the company abandoned AMD during the Polaris era. It could be said that Max Sun has now replaced AMD with Intel. On December 3rd, Max Sun will officially unveil its first graphics card featuring Intel Arc Battlemage, which coincides with the official announcement of Intel's new graphics card series. And so it's not so much that I'm particularly interested that like there's a Max Sun variant, because like I said, that thing will probably go on sale in China. But this is yet more corroboration that Battlemage is launching in December. I think in the West, we have seen indications. I think ASRock had a leak over the Thanksgiving holiday with an early post of an Amazon site that indicated its card releasing in early December. All these things have been looked at as further confirmation that the thing was coming, but not yet like official corroboration. This is video cards, being fairly bullish in saying that no, this card is coming and landing this week, supposedly today. So I haven't seen follow-up on this yet, whether or not this was announced officially. Although its Twitter account shows it didn't have the date on the Twitter account. So potentially this thing has gone down, and even if it hasn't, like I said, there were fairly strong indications that ASRock was getting ready to launch it. So we've very much been in a will they, won't they kind of standby status on Battlemage. But we've been getting lots of indications and warnings that it was going to go down in early December. It seems like a fairly good approach for Intel to make. It gets their card out. Hopefully these things are coming in at very good price points, maybe in the $200 to $300 range. So at least one of the variants of their card. I mean, I haven't tracked Archmage, I haven't tracked Arc as closely, but I think one of their cards debuted last time at an MSRP of about $180. We're not expecting prices to be that depressed this time around, but again, they could come in, cheaper than AMD, which is kind of the major thing that they would need to go to market with to become a really viable option. I think for lots of consumers, like the addressable market where this card will kind of sit is in the area where you're building a kind of first PC for a new gamer. Or just maybe somebody who's looking for something a little bit better than a console, or somebody who is looking to PC game, but plays again like Dota or live service games that don't have a big, huge performance requirement. Kind of back in the day, like when you used to build like kind of World of Warcraft kind of boxes. This is a card that will do the trick and get you in. Above the minimum with a good amount of headroom and allow you to do, play a lot of games. And so, if this thing comes in at $200 to $300, that's a good point for it to enter the market. NVIDIA's approach right now, it is, as I mentioned before, is it's very emboldened, and it's also kind of enabled, right, to behave the way that it behaves on the market by consumers, by content creators who are looking for a card that handles not just gaming, but the content creation part. We'll talk about the live stream community here in a minute with our last story and kind of how they've impacted the PC video game market. But NVIDIA is able to kind of saunter around with a lot of moxie right now. It's very important for Battlemage, for ARC to be successful on the market, in my opinion, because it provides a bit of a bracing dynamic, right, for NVIDIA. And causes them to at least think, maybe not to blink just yet, but at least to think about the dynamics on the market. It at a minimum just gives gamers a third supplier to go to, and the more suppliers, Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, laws of economics do exist. I often say that about the gaming industry. Lots of YouTubers and Twitter commenters try to assert that laws of economics do not apply to the video game industry. They absolutely do, and more suppliers is better. With the GPU market, I think so many gamers today just don't understand the history of where we were in the late 90s and early 2000s when we had S3, we had Voodoo, we had and those were GPU designers, right, putting out chips. But then you also had Diamond, you had other AIB vendors in the mix that again kept prices, to me, kind of reined in. And then when it got down to where it was just kind of NVIDIA and AMD, if you look back in the history of the early 2000s, what was the first thing they did? They colluded to inflate prices in the video card market. So, having only those two around as the options is not good, and hopefully we'll see an end to that. I am not yet at the point where I would really go after an Intel GPU. But that potential is there, right? If Battle Mage sticks the landing and becomes a viable option. Not every box that I have is high end. I don't have any 60 series, any XX60 series NVIDIA GPUs right now. I think my lowest is a 3070 Ti. But when I have to upgrade that GPU, if there's an Intel card that's around that, and the 3070 Ti that's an upgrade that I wound up doing because I had a CyberPower PC that had an ASRock Radeon GPU in it. I tried my hardest to deal with Radeon GPUs, and then I just failed out of that loop. And at that point, when I was going to upgrade, I just didn't want to come in right at a 60 series card. So, but normally I keep a lower end spec PC in the farm. And so again, if there's an Intel Arc, if there's a Battle Mage card on the market that fits that bill for the low end, it's definitely something that I can see myself going after. All right, let's go ahead and move into the last news story. I'm going to get a spot of coffee, and then we'll go ahead and get into the last segment, which is not going to be short. We are going to be heading towards wrapping things up, but it's a fairly meaty piece that I want to get into. All right, so the last news story of the night. Gamers Nexus claims NZXT's Flex PC rental program is a scam. The YouTube investigation points out that NZXT's listed specs for rental gaming PCs change rapidly while attached performance estimates stay the same. This news story over on The Verge by Emma Roth. An hour-long video published Saturday by Gamers Nexus, a YouTube channel focused on PC gaming hardware, accuses NZXT's PC rental program of bait-and-switch tactics with prices and specs that are constantly changing. The Flex program allows customers to rent pre-built gaming PCs starting at $59 per month, not including a mouse, keyboard, or monitor. But Gamers Nexus shows that NZXT changes the specs and prices of PC models day to day in some instances, and offers PCs with very different setups under similar model names depending on whether you are looking to buy or rent. The rapidly changing prices also obscure the potential value of listed discounts as the packages shift back and forth. So I am not going to bring up their video because their video is monetized, and I'm sure that they have some desire to push people to their channel to actually view the video. But I'm going to talk at length about some other dynamics and factors in this news story, because I don't think this news story is the news story itself. So let's talk a little bit about today's current market dynamic and how this thing is even possible. and it starts with kind of the live streaming community, in my opinion, Twitch, YouTube, etc. And so I spent a lot of time with the live streaming community, probably from 2014 to 2000 until the pandemic, really. Engaged on Facebook groups and kind of with a network of smaller streamers that I associated with. And the start of the inflection of the market dynamic away from what it used to be to what it is starts a little bit like this. And so you have a streamer, a kid, whatever, somebody looking for an additional stream of revenue who wants to start live streaming. They start on a console because that's where most of us start gaming, and it's less expensive. And so that person is now streaming directly from their console. There's multiple streamers that I know who started off this way, three of which I think are actually partners now. And I can remember going back to like when I first came into their chat room in their live stream, and there they were, like, streaming from a console. At best, it's like a C grade quality live stream, just in terms of the graphic fidelity. This is a person who's on a hoopty of a camera, right? One of those goofy, Sony or Microsoft proprietary, first-party cameras that plugs into a USB port on the system. I can't remember if Xbox allows you to use third-party cameras, but PlayStation has their PlayStation Eye, I think, or whatever it is. They're just, look, I have a very lofty concept of live stream quality, again, simply from in terms of graphic fidelity, and those streams are horrible. Obviously those people have great personalities and great entertainment value. That's why they're partners now, right? But their stream quality is just horrible at the outset. And so then those streamers get a following and they experience some growth. And then you get people like me or others who are techies who are parts of the streaming community who start coming by their live streams, and explains to them that their live streams don't look great and they could look a lot better, particularly if they live stream from a dedicated streaming PC. And so that person, again, kind of experiences growth. They're doing all the things, right? They have they're getting the donos and, when whatever, and starting to collect revenue. And they put up a little thing on their page talking about how they're saving money for a gaming PC. And so eventually they buy one, or they have, and they set up their Discord server. They either buy a PC or they have their tech followers spec the parts, and then they buy them, and then they have, a friend of theirs, again, somebody who's typically like a follower or a mod in their channel, like, build the PC for them. And so now you have this influencer, because they've tipped over, right, the point of being a live streamer to now kind of becoming an influencer, right, with some following. And they're a live streamer, and they're working from this dedicated streaming PC. It is just a hop, skip, and a jump before they then hit the point where they say, hey, I'm using this thing to live stream, I might as well start gaming on it. Because, of course, when somebody recommends them the parts to buy, they, of course, recommend a GPU for them to handle, right, the live streaming and recording and some of their other content creation needs. And so that person quickly becomes, converts over to becoming a PC gamer. And again, I've seen this happen with, three of the three live streamers I know. I first entered their streams. They were playing on Xbox. And then, they're partners now. They've got high-end DSLR cameras or mirrorless ICL cameras. They've got the Elgato lights and the stream decks and, like, all the gear. But not these people, but like other people, one of the things that I used to do when I was in the live stream community is I often, went around to live streams, just, looking for up-and-coming streamers and small streamers to network with. And often just as kind of a data point, because I was also doing, my gaming podcast at the time, I would just inquire and ask some questions about, like, their tech and their rig and how they live streamed, and, whether or not they were playing in 4K, but then live streaming out. And, and one of the roles I played in the live stream community was offering a lot of tech support and advice. And so one of the commonalities in that questioning cycle that I would go through is I would often go into these streams and just encounter live streamers, some of which were garnering significant followings, and they would not know much about the tech that they were actually gaming on. Some of them would know nothing, right? I mean, and then some of them would just be very oblivious, right? And this comes from a lot of live streamers just copy whatever PC specs they saw on Ninja's page or Shroud's page, or and that goes to their production equipment as well. They like so many of the mics, right, and automation consoles and capture cards and things are so common because, again, there's a lot of proliferation from people just going and copying what a big streamer does. And so, again, that's a dynamic that's on the market now, right? Because and not only, have they entered the market, but then they have followers, right? Who then also become PC gamers. But again, they're entering. The vector I entered from was, I spent hours and hours and days on Ars Technica, right, on the forums, like learning all the ins and outs of the specs and figuring out what I needed to know and understand in order to build a PC. And then there was Dig, before there was Reddit, and there were all these places, and that was a certain big part of the DIY market that was the PC gaming market back then. Now I think you have much more of an influence, much more of an addressable market, much more of a market dynamic of people who come into the market, and I don't want to call them PC tech illiterate, but they're not as informed as I think the market used to be. The market's larger, and that's good. That's more sustainable, better for everyone. But there's just a large number of PC gamers in the space now that are not DIYers, that are not building their rigs. I don't think they're even heavily modifying their rigs or buying pre-builts, and then the pre-built sits on their desk, right, for 2 to 5 years until they buy another one. And that's just a difference in a market dynamic. And a lot of live streamers and influencers, a lot of them are not builders, but they will still speak as if they know all the ins and outs, right, of the tech in PCs. And that's where, and then unfortunately you have a lot of the dynamic like we saw with the PS5 Pro, where you have people running around telling people they can build a $700 PC, and they're recommending PCs for them and parts that have no upgrade path. They're telling them to buy bootleg pieces off of eBay and Facebook Marketplace and all this kind of mess. But like I said, you have this influencer effect, I think, that ripples out throughout the market, with the end result being that people are just, I think, less informed, and then that cascades across numbers. And so you have a smaller segment of the market that's actually, I would say, fairly well informed, right, on PC tech, and has a different market dynamic. Let me also mention that along with those influencers, when you watch this NZXT exposure, right, video by Gamers Nexus, you also see a lot of influencers who are part of the problem because they were paid advertisers for NZXT, right? So again, that's another vector where you have proliferation of the problem. And so my whole point of this is that while this NZXT thing is a bad, and by no means am I saying whatsoever NZXT should get a pass for this. They should absolutely be held accountable. But the thing that I want to cite is that there's a reason why this thing even became possible. It's analogous to what I've said a few years ago about leakers, right? We in the gaming community, we have this big problem with leakers who what was the guy's name referred to? I can't remember. There was a guy who got exposed or whatever because he was a big leaker, because he broke NDAs and all these other things. But the point is that the reason that person exists and the reason why insider gaming exists now with Tom Henderson is because we thirst for that information, right? Because we fiend for it, and so people feed that need. In the same way or in a similar fashion, I should say, NZXT was able to pull this off because there are consumers in the market now who are looking to consume this way. Whereas you go back 10 or 15 years ago, I don't think you would have been able to pull off as big a scam on as large a scale as this, because the bulk of the market was more people canted in the direction of the DIY vector than I would kind of say like beige box buyers, meaning again people who are buying prepackaged stuff. And that's a tough conversation to have, and a tough allegation for me to make, but I think it's something that needs to be thought about. An unfortunate part of today's society, and again the PC gaming market, and a tough conversation to be had, is that today's society, today's economy, today's market, in particular in the West and in particular in America, we're just a credit-driven consumer economy, right? And that's a fact. And so in this day of cell phone carrier subsidies, and I often talk about the cell phone carrier subsidies, right? There's a certain characterization that people have, and again, a lot of this came out of the discussions of consolidation. But I think people don't understand. Again, cell phone carriers used to subsidize your phone, right? So Apple would sell the carrier a phone at $500, $600, $700, $800. The carrier would pay $400, $500, $600 for the phone. They would then sell it to you at $99, right? And then you would enter into them a 2-year commitment agreement, right, to pay for your service. But they were subsidizing the phone. That briefly went away for a while. And then what came back was they now sell you the phone at full price. They charge you, right, a fee to basically finance the phone, and they charge you for the service. And so this whole notion in this argument that market consolidation and the oligopoly that exists in the cell phone market has not led to higher prices is just wrong, right? From people who don't maintain a traceability on the history of how this whole thing has gone down. And so by the same token, you're right, again, in this day of cell phone carrier subsidies, Xbox All Access, our society, in particular gamers, maybe some tech nerds as well, have kind of become saturated with this notion of obtaining access to things that keep you in a social media conversation without actually, and I'm just going to say it, and I'm sorry, not having earned the money to purchase the thing. My personal experience, and I've kind of, recounted this on multiple times on multiple podcasts. Look, I grew up impoverished, living in the projects. I used to, when my mom used to go to this little strip mall shopping center where she used to get her hair done, I used to go down to the Radio Shack, and I would just stare in the window, because I used to go inside the Radio Shack, and then I got told not to come in there anymore if I wasn't buying anything. And so I would stare in the window of the Radio Shack at all the Tandy 1000s or whatever. I used to go through the sales papers and just dream about all the peripherals that I would buy for a computer that I could never afford. And then, as I grew up through young adulthood, I probably made some bad decisions, and went down this path of constantly trying to obtain this stuff that I didn't really have the money for, and so now I don't do that, right? And again, I'm not trying to shame anyone for renting a PC or subscribing to Game Pass or doing any of the things that they want to do, but I think hey, what's up, man? Overboard, thanks a lot for coming through the live stream, appreciate it. I think what needs to be acknowledged is that there's consequences for all the choices that we make, and one of the things that we tend not to say is there's only one reason any corporation is interested, any financing institution, any bank is interested in you having good credit, and that's for the purposes of you borrowing money from a financial institution for which they can charge you additional money for the privilege of being allowed to borrow money from them, right? And so, one of my points about this whole NZXT thing is that it wouldn't have been able to go down unless there were consumers who enabled it. And again, I'm not putting the blame on them. What I'm saying is that the market today is different, and has dynamics around it and has demographics in it that allow things like this to happen. And so your need to be informed and aware and technically savvy if you're going to be a PC gamer. Like, again, what I'm pointing to is that the danger is that we have an expansion of the PC gaming market of people who have chosen to participate in the market while not being knowledgeable about the technology. And that, to me, is a dangerous dynamic, right? It's a dangerous thing. It means that you can potentially become a consumer who is uninformed and therefore can be left bereft to make bad choices. So, you know, so at the end of the day, all of this is my way of kind of lecturing everyone, admittedly, and telling you, be informed. There's incredibly little sense in paying anything over market price for a gaming PC that is going to be obsolete by the time you pay it off. And you're going to have paid more for it than it is worth. You know, even we focus on the NZXT thing now because the price that you wind up paying is exorbitant, but even doing thing, and again, these are choices that I made, right? But even going to Dell and financing a gaming laptop, and at the end of the day, paying more for that gaming laptop over a period of time, by which, again, it is obsolete and you've paid more for it versus just pocketing your money and saving up for it and buying it, is probably not a great decision. You know, quite honestly, I'm just going to honestly say, if that's the only way you could ever PC game, I would strongly encourage you to just keep gaming on console. It's a great way to game. It's less expensive. It's a manner of experiencing very close to the same experiences that we get on PC. Again, admittedly, in some ways, and then definitely there's definitely areas where you're not experiencing the same thing that we experience on PC. But again, in the spectrum of, you know, making bad decisions to have a better experience gaming on PC versus making good decisions and having a potentially lesser experience, I'm going to tell you, probably make good decisions and have a potentially lesser experience. I didn't watch the entire NZXT video by Gamers Nexus. The video is very redundant, and I don't say that as a criticism, but again, it covers a lot of things that should never have been enabled to happen on the market. There's a lot of content in that video about the licensing agreement, and this is, again, a thing that I've harped on, even when I talk about video games, right? There's this whole thing about, like, you know, buy physical, you know, because you own a video game, and I'm like, no, you don't. Like, not in the historical sense of property law. If you go back to the origins of law and really read some of the texts from like the 1700s and the 1800s, the notion of property hinges on key tenets, such as the fact that it is a thing that you can obtain possession of, after which no one can tell you the manner in which you can use it, and that's not the case with software. And then I also talk about how the fact, like, when you don't read into like the EULA, and even like the warranty information, like, lots of people don't understand, like, gaming, video games software is not warranted. In fact, if you look at like the Rockstar T's and C's, the Rockstar T's and C's don't even commit to like that the software is going to work that they sell you, right? That, once you put it on your hardware, then that's like your own problem. And so there's a lot of stuff in the video about, the licensing agreements, but those things, again, are not, to me, specific to NZXT. But it also covers territory where, one of the egregious things in the licensing agreement is that you give NZXT a complete open license to utilize whatever data of yours that they collect and obtain. And so one of the scenarios that the video covers is, okay, so if you rent this gaming PC from them and then return it, that any data that you have on the hard drive, they're allowed to use. Now, that's a valid point. But again, I would just say, like, if you're so uninformed that you would rent a PC and then ship them the hard drive back without wiping all of your data from it and factory restoring it, Like that's a problem. And I'm not talking about hitting like a utility that tells you it's factory restored. I'm talking about using DoD level, right, hard drive erasure utilities to overwrite like every bit on that storage device, with a zero. That's a problem. Like that's a thing that you should not do. And so, yes, I would say for a lot of people, it would be good to watch the entire video. I would say for a lot of people who are above, I would just call it an arbitrary 50% line of like knowing what the hell it is you're doing and what you bought. Like, I don't know that you need to watch the entire video. I'm going to kind of start wrapping up here because I could go on about this forever. It's great that Gamers Nexus broke this story, but to be honest, it's only a story because NZXT was going to be a sponsor for them. I think this practice has been going on for a while, and if they hadn't put in a bid to become, I think it was like a 23K ad campaign that they were going to start on Gamers Nexus, I don't know that this would have ever been discovered. And I'm sure that they are ad partners with other gaming websites and YouTube channels besides Gamers Nexus. Back in the day, Maximum PC used to do stuff like this with their Watchdog column. So I don't know, as I mentioned before, I don't know that that the story here is as much that NZXT did a bad thing, as much as this is one place where I would definitely say no one should be consuming gaming PCs via this consumption model or anything similar to it. I think, kind of my last summary statement is, while I'm sure that people in social media circles are going to point a lot of fingers at NZXT having done a bad thing, I'm going to also put people on blast and say that the gaggle of fools who ran around telling people they could buy a $700 gaming PC and that they should do that instead of buying a PlayStation 5 Pro because they were concerned about pocket watching and console warring. My problem with you guys is you guys were also hypocrites, and you guys also told lies, right? Including some of these official channels with millions of followers, because they were recommending parts to people that have no upgrade path, right? They were recommending parts to people that were on a socket that Intel is not going to make more processors for, that their processor that just dropped is on a new socket form factor. And so when those people need to upgrade, they're not going to just need to upgrade their CPU. They're going to need to upgrade their CPU, their motherboard, and their RAM. And at the end of the day, in a shortened recap cycle, they're going to wind up spending far more than $700. So you guys, in my opinion, are just as culpable as NZXT. And the people who are going to say, well, but those people weren't monetizing and profiteering from it, I would counter that with absolutely they were trying to. Absolutely, they were trying to drive people to their Twitter accounts. They were trying to drive people to their YouTube channels. They were trying to drive clicks. They were hoping that was vectoring in the direction of increasing their monetization of their channels. So in my opinion, they're not any better than NZXT. Granted, NZXT corporate greed, RICO, like just there's an organized criminal manner of trying to extort money from gullible customers. But again, the people who are running around with that narrative and that agenda, we're also preying on people's gullibility. So that's where we are. Look, thanks so much for anybody who happened to, like I said, to come through the live stream, participate in the live chat. I appreciate you guys. Thanks a lot, man. Overboard for swinging through. For anybody who watches the archive version of this on the Rounding Off Infinity gaming channel on YouTube, I appreciate you as well. Please feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you can receive a notification whenever I post new content. Again, I don't monetize my channel. I don't think that I ever will. I don't monetize any of my social media vectors, but again, it's the only reason I recommend you subscribe is just so you get an alert when I'm going to go live, or whenever I actually post new content, when I post pre-recorded videos. So until then, take care of yourself, stay safe out there, play the games that you like, come here to talk to me about the games that you love. Once again, my name has been Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, one of the co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going weekly games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel, as well as one of the co-hosts on the Basement Radio Arcade podcast. For E2KG, the outlook for the rest of the year is we just recorded episode 366 We've got one more regular episode, 367. We are normally live on Sunday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We've got one more regular episode, and then the following weekend, we're going to do a slightly non-standard schedule. Remember, that will be the week of the TGAs, and so we will broadcast on December 8th with kind of our last regular episode of the year. All right, Man Overboard, have a good one. Thanks so much again for coming through. So we'll broadcast our last regular episode on December 8th. The TGAs will be the December 12th, that Thursday night. And then the following Sunday, December 15th. Thanks so much for being overboard. Appreciate it for coming through, E2KG. And then the following Sunday and Monday, so the 15th and the 16th, we will do our 8th annual Gaming Superlative Awards. For people who are not familiar with that show and its format, we don't do Game of the Year because we're 3 regular schmoes, maybe 4 if our 4th co-host joins us. We've never felt that we're qualified to really do Game of the Year. Even though some people say, well, it's your Game of the Year, we tend to take a more puritanical view to it. And we don't play enough games on the market to constitute being able to hold a Game of the Year. There are probably around 380 or so games each year that come out that are that tend to be rated 70 or above on OpenCritic and Metacritic. And I kind of feel like even as much as we play games, you need kind of a wider palette and wider aperture to really be able to talk about doing a Game of the Year. We do a thing called Gaming Superlatives, where we have 14 categories of kind of, if you think about back to like your high school graduation, your high school yearbook, we have categories like, kind of like most likely to succeed or our class clown or whatever. They're not quite that. They're different category names, but that's kind of the way we do it. And then each co-host makes their picks for those 14. And then in round robin fashion, we go through everybody's picks over the 2 nights. We may have it down to 1 night with just 3 co-hosts if we only do 3, but we're going to schedule it for 2 nights with a part 1 and a part 2. So if you guys want to come through and participate in that, we'd love to see you. Also, the way we tend to do it is everybody turns their picks in kind of blind nil to the person who's going to host that episode before the TGAs to minimize the risk that any of the picks we make would be influenced by the outcome of the TGAs. We don't sidestep the golden joysticks because unfortunately the golden joysticks just go down too early, but that's what we'll be doing over the next 2 weeks. So again, thanks a lot everybody, for anybody who swings by and anybody who comes by to watch this video. I really appreciate it. Until next time, like I said, take care of yourselves, stay safe out there. That's going to do it for me for tonight for this episode of Talking About Games. Until next time, good night, good luck, and good gaming. That's going to do it for me. I'm out of here.